For 22 years, Michael Tanzi has sat on death row, waiting for the sentence he was handed back in 2000, a sentence for the brutal murder of 49-year-old Janet Acosta. Now, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has signed his death warrant, setting the stage for his execution. But Tanzi isn't just fighting to stay alive, he's doing it with a bizarre and controversial argument. His lawyers claim that his own morbid obesity makes lethal injection too painful and could lead to needless suffering. Could his weight actually spare him from the execution chamber, or is this just a desperate attempt to escape justice? Let's dive into the disturbing case of Michael Tanzi. On April 25, 2000, Janet Acosta was sitting in her maroon van parked in the Japanese gardens in Miami during her lunch break reading a book. Tanzi was stuck in Miami at the time with no way to get back to Key West, where he had been spending the preceding months. Tanzi went up to Acosta, who was sitting in her car with her window down, and asked for a cigarette and a time. Tanzi struck Acosta in the face while she was not paying attention, and because she was dizzy from the hits, he managed to enter the van. After threatening her with a razor blade, he took her in the van and drove off. Until he arrived at Homestead, Tanzi held Acosta by the wrist to make sure she remained in the car and didn't try to escape. After arriving in Homestead, Tanzi made a stop at a gas station where he gagged Acosta with a towel and bound her with rope from her van. He also threatened her, saying he would cut her from year to year if she made noise. Acosta handed over $53 in cash to Tanzi. He then tried to use her bank card, which he found after searching through her stuff, to purchase some cigarettes and a Coke. Tanzi also coerced Acosta into having oral sex while they were still in Homestead, threatening to murder her with his razor if she hurt him. But Acosta's teeth were broken because he punched her so hard, so he stopped her. After that, Tanzi drove off with Acosta gagged and bound in the back of the van until he arrived at Tavernier, Florida Keys, where he pulled over at around 5:15 p.m. to take money out of Acosta's bank account. In order to get her PIN, he threatened to use the razor once more. After that, Tanzi made a stop at a hardware store to get some more razor blades and duct tape. He kept traveling till he arrived at Sugarloaf Key at around 6:30 p.m. Acosta was getting in the way, so he decided he had to get rid of her. He was also aware that if he let her live, he would be apprehended soon. Tanzi continued on to Cudjoe Key's remote blimp road. After threatening to kill her, Tanzi crossed a length of rope and started strangling her. He paused for a while to cover her eyes, nose, and mouth with duct tape to try to muffle the sound. After that, Tanzi kept strangling Acosta until she passed away. He abandoned her in a remote, wooded spot where he believed no one would find her. Tanzi used Acosta's ATM card, went shopping, ate, smoked Mary Jane, and visited friends in Key West after the murder. Tanzi had intended to buy drugs, sleep in a hotel, use more of Acosta's money, and change the van's look. On April 27, 2000, however, Tanzi's actions came to a stop when the police noticed him heading back to Acosta's van, which they had found and had under surveillance following a missing persons complaint from friends and co-workers. Tanzi was carrying receipts from his ATM purchases and withdrawals in his pocket when the police arrived. He immediately knew what was happening. Additionally, he said on the spur of the moment that he wanted to discuss some bad things he had done. Waiving his rights, Tanzi admitted to assaulting, kidnapping, robbing, essaying, and killing Janet Acosta while in a police vehicle on his way to the Key West Police Department. On multiple audio and video recordings, Tanzi reiterated his admission in more detail. Tanzi also showed the police where he threw away the duct tape and rope, as well as where he had disposed of Janet Acosta's body. Tanzi was charged with Janet Acosta's first-degree murder. At first, he pled not guilty, but just before the trial, he pleaded guilty to the counts of first-degree murder, carjacking, kidnapping, and armed robbery. He presented two mental health specialists during the penalty phase of his trial, including a counselor at a homeless shelter and a forensic social worker who specializes in sexual behavior issues. These experts testified to Tanzi's lengthy history of mental health issues, as well as his diagnosis and stays at several facilities. The social worker said that a 13-year-old boy had inappropriately touched Tanzi when he was 8 years old, and then, at a later time, the 13-year-old also fully essayed Tanzi. Only when the perpetrator became 18 and joined the military did the 5 years of sexual abuse came to an end. After the abuse, Tanzi's behavior changed and he started being an aggressor himself. Psychiatrist Dr. Vickery testified that Tanzi had antisocial personality disorder, paraphilia, substance abuse, and bipolar disorder. Tanzi had a learning handicap, PTSD, exhibitionism, sadism, voyeurism, ADHD, polysubstance dependence, grief, and antisocial personality disorder, according to psychologist Dr. Raphael's testimony. Additionally, also according to Dr. Raphael, the firm he was working for suspected Tanzi also had schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, or psychotic disorder. Tanzi's mother testified that she believed her son was a typical 3-year-old, but by the time he was 6, he was struggling to get along with other kids. She further stated in her testimony that following the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, Tanzi's father emotionally and physically mistreated him. When Tanzi was 8 years old, she observed behavioral changes after his father's illness and death, as well as after he had been essayed by an older boy. Throughout Tanzi's early years, she sought treatment for him at several different facilities. The jury unanimously recommended death after the penalty phase, and the trial judge acted on that recommendation. Janet Acosta was not Tanzi's only victim. He was charged but not tried or convicted for a murder he committed in Massachusetts. He killed 36-year-old Caroline Holder in 1999 by stabbing and strangling her. The prosecutors decided to not go through with a trial in this case because by the time they had gathered all of the required evidence, Tanzi was already on death row for Janet's murder. Recently, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, signed the death warrant for Michael Tanzi, and his scheduled execution date is April 8. His lawyers are trying to save his life. Circuit Judge Timothy Coing of Monroe County issued a 12-page ruling dismissing Tanzi's attorney's attempts to stop the execution. The attorneys petitioned the Supreme Court to delay the execution and send the matter back to the Circuit Court for additional proceedings. When the Supreme Court will make a decision is unknown. The state's use of etomidate as a sedative prior to the administration of other fatal injection medications is one of the issues raised in the appeal. The lawyers contended that the medication probably wouldn't keep Tanzi in a deep state of sedation for the duration of his execution due to his body weight. The brief also stated that when another medicine is given, there is a significant risk that Tanzi will be paralyzed but aware, creating the sensation of being burned from the inside. The Attorney General's office refuted those claims. According to the state brief, Tanzi fails to provide any support for his baseless claim that the massive dose of etomidate, which has been used repeatedly and successfully in Florida's lethal injection protocol, will not work for him. Executions must be performed by electric chair or lethal injection in accordance with Florida law. Bills that would permit a method not deemed unconstitutional, which would permit execution by firing squad or nitrogen gas, have begun to move ahead in the State House and Senate. Tanzi's attorneys claimed that the state 3-drug lethal injection might result in serious illness and needless suffering because of his obesity. It remains to be seen if his execution will move forward or if he will get a stay. There are 3 other inmates that have active death warrants for the month of April: Mika Almadi, South Carolina; Moises Sandoval Mendoza, Texas; and James Osgood, Alabama. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to remain up to date with their cases and the upcoming executions.